My name's Farmer Bill Tall. I'm here at City Farmers Nursery. Started City Farmers Nursery 40 years ago when I was 16. It's an organically run nursery and maintained that way. We carry a multitude of different things. We carry everything from beekeeping supplies to canning supplies to organic vegetables, and we even have a produce stand on the premises here and a really neat restaurant. So if you're looking for a place to shop that's unique and want a destination point that you can do many things, not just buy plants, City Farmers Nursery is the best place to come. It's located in City Heights, right in the center of San Diego. We're near all the 5 freeways that are in San Diego, and I'd love to have you come.
So, of course, we have to start with a joke. So the joke is this. I don't know if you've ever seen Far Side. Gary Larson does a cartoon, but he had a graph one time. The graph of farmers and crazy people, and the intersection of those two graphs was beekeepers. so that was his idea. But I think that really, if you look at the history of it, and you look at human evolution, humans have partnered with different animal species throughout our existence. I think probably the dog was the original one, because when you're still running and not even living in a stationary location as a nomad, you can have a dog with you, and you can go out, he can help you hunt, you can kind of guard your compound at night. So I think probably dogs were first, and probably horses and bees probably came along as soon as people started to settle down. Because as soon as you settle down, you want to amplify your work effort, you get a horse. And you want to amplify your crop effort, you get something that can pollinate, and that's a bee. And then also it was a source of sugar for up until the 1800s, when regular sugar became available, table sugar as we know it today, high fructose corn syrup and stevia, all the other things that we can eat as sweeteners, which are horrible for us, instead of eating honey, which is the original sweetener. So I think that the dog has become a pet. He's no longer a partner so much anymore. It used to be an essential part of the community. Now they're just kind of pets. Horses, most of them are off grazing somewhere. They're using tractors instead. But the bee is still an important part of our ecosystem. Without bee pollination, 1/3 of our food supply would be non-existent, and we have a very boring diet. So we have I'm just going to kind of run through these slides first. This was presentation for the just to kind of show some of the crops that bees do pollinate. So you can see a big list of things here, and obviously very interesting, colorful fruits and vegetables, a lot of phytonutrients, things that without them in our diet we're probably going to get kind of sick. On a personal note, I've started eating a lot more green leafy. My cholesterol has plummeted from 200 to 150 over the last 7 months. So it's good to eat those green leafies, and also cut out dairy. Anyway, so here's the Egyptians way back 5,000 years ago with their honey bees, and this over here is the honey bee. The nest they used, it was like a wicker container. They used clay, and they also used weaved skeps to keep the bees in. So they wanted the bees to be portable. They used to take them up and down the Nile River to pollinate their different crops. So they were probably the first people to transport bees around. Right now, that industry is huge. The almond event, which is happening right now in Central California, there's not enough bees in the whole country to do that pollination event. So it's a huge almond crop, depending essentially on this one limiting factor, which is the number of bees in the U.S. So, like we talked about, 30% of the food that's out there is from the bees. We've had a lot of bee loss, a lot of loss in the number of bees here. The population shrunk by 30%. So this is colony collapse disorder, something I think is due to neonicotinoids, which is a pesticide that's being used, and our EPA is not doing their job in protecting us from that pesticide. They gave them a waiver to let them use the pesticide before really establishing that it did damage bees' viability. So at some point we'll have to hold them accountable. That'll be our next mission.
Yes.
And so $15 billion worth of produce in the United States, so bees are money. They are so money. And here's different types of bees. So if you're not familiar with the worker bee, so in this hive right here, one of these boxes could probably have between 10 and 20,000 bees. Each frame can have 2,000 bees on it. So obviously you get a lot of bees, a lot of workers. The queen, there's only one per hive typically. I've seen two in a couple of cases. I've seen them, princess and a queen, so the young daughter queen and the queen. I've seen on the same frame in the same hive. I was like, get me a camera, I can't believe there's two queens and they're just like getting along right here. What's happening? Yeah, but I think it was mother-daughter, and I think that eventually the mother took off with half of her colony and left the daughter there with the remnant of her colony, which is typical, right? That's what they normally do. The old queen leaves. And then the drone, which is the kind of male equivalent, kind of a playboy. He's interested in food. He's interested in hanging out in the hive, and he's interested in chasing queens occasionally. But it does kill him when he mates, so it's his last hurrah. And that's the simple life of a drone. So there's a little, at the end of the season, they kick them out of the hive, so they get tossed out after the mating season's over. There's the worker, pretty much the most important bee in the hive. A lot of decisions are actually made in the hive by the workers, kind of in a democratic situation. So if the bees are hanging in a swarm somewhere, they've swarmed out of a hive, so that mother queen took her half of the hive and she went and sat on a branch, send a bunch of scouts out to try to find a new place to live. And the bees will go out and they'll look at different options, different scout bees will, and they'll come back and report what they've seen. And different bees will go back and forth and try to figure out which is the best location. So you want to have a location which is protected from, the elements, rain and so forth. It's got to be something they can keep warm. So it's got to be a space that they can, with their buzzing and so forth, and eating honey and keeping themselves physically active, they can keep the temperature up above 91 degrees. It's got to be above 91 and below 98 in order to keep the brood viable. So that's a huge part of picking the space. So you want to pick not too big, not too small, and safe from rain and predators. So that's kind of a democratic decision that's being made by all the bees in a hive during that time in their cycle. There's the queen, and no, she doesn't come painted that way. That's something some people do to her. They paint her to designate what year she was born. So there's 5 colors, and so you can look at a bee color and tell which of the 5 years she was installed in, and give you an idea whether she's kind of reached her viability, her lifetime. Usually 2 years per queen in a commercial hive.
What do they use to mark the queen? Is that special?
I've used is fingernail polish. So it's like an enamel paint, really. I think you can get it in a paint pen, and there's special containers that can be used to paint the queen so that she doesn't rub it off, and then they don't take it off her until it dries. So you can get one of those if you're interested in marking your queen, and it makes it a lot easier to find her. We're going to talk about trying to find a queen today, and you're looking on, at least 10 frames, and maybe in this case 20 frames, and if they're full of bees and those bees aren't happy, you've got a real task ahead of you trying to dig that little queen out of there if she's not marked. If she's marked, you got a chance, of finding her, but without it, it's a lot more of a struggle. So this is a feral hive. So this is just a bunch of probably in this part of the world, in our county, this is Africanized bees right here. 70% of the bees in San Diego County are Africanized. Once in a while, you do find a swarm of bees that's nice, and that's kind of an exception. But I've had it happen. I've taken bees out of Ginger's garage last year. They're the nicest bees I ever saw. And then I think ants got in there and they swarmed away from where they ended up eventually. So it's too bad we lost that.
Those are Argentine ants?
Argentine sugar ants, are very, very interested in honey. So we're going to look at this hive stand design here. My friend Becky built this for me up in Ramona, and it's got all the features of a good hive stand design, I think. So we'll talk about that a little bit later also. In the bottom there, I'm not sure what's happening here. This is not normal unless it's a very, very hot day. This hive situation with all the bees on the outside. Unless the bees are swarming in or swarming out, or it's a very hot day, that's an unusual situation to have all those bees on the outside of the box. Normally, like 4/5 of the bees are in the hive. They're doing jobs in the hive. You only see maybe 1/5 at a time. They're flying around foraging and so forth. So a lot of things happening in the hive. as the bees are flying around doing their job. So they do it. So I don't know if you've seen the bee dance. It's kind of this little dance that the bee does when it finds a source of water or nectar or pollen. And depending on how the dance is done, other bees can interpret distance and direction from the hive to where the source of food is. So it can help them determine and exploit particular sources of food and water near their hive. Every pound of honey, 25,000 flights, and about 2 million flowers to visit to make 1 pound of honey. So obviously when you're eating that honey, cherish it. It's a delightful treat made by the work of thousands of bees. These are some of our basic tools. So here's the hive tool right here. We can look at different things. This is used to scrape honey off of a frame before you spin it. Smoker, obviously, and bee suit. Got to have a bee suit if you're going to deal with bees in San Diego County, because you just don't know. A lot of times these bees are pretty hot, and in order to handle them, you really need to be protected. And I prefer that design. Some people have the safari hat with the net mesh. A lot of times I've seen the bees get underneath that mesh, and so that's a little bit more problematic. And so if you can see this design at Dayton, that's one I've found is the best one. You need to keep it away from your face. If it gets next to your face, it can sting your nose and make your nose.
At the tip of your nose.
Right.
The other day.
nice and decorated red nose.
Nice and safe. Nose got against the net anyway.
And so you can zip the top off. You can machine wash the suit. You can take the top off and kind of hand wash that, because if you machine wash that, it'll get wrecked. But it's pretty good practical bee suit. So this is kind of a standard configuration: 2 deeps and a super, and the super can be 1 or 5 stacked on top of that. Commercial guys go up to about 5. The 2 deep boxes have these 9-inch frames in them right here, and the outside 2 are probably going to be full of honey as insulation. So honey has got 3 functions to the hive. It's a food source. It gives structural integrity to the wax. The wax is pretty flimsy without any honey. It kind of stiffens it up and makes it structural. And then it's insulation. So if you actually look at the inside of the hive, where the brood nest is, where the prenatal unit is, the NICU in the beehive is located, it's kind of the size of maybe a football in the center of the hive, and around it on the top and on the sides is all honey to keep that area warm. It's again between 91 and 98 degrees. So these are frames. We're going to talk about frames in a little bit. There's a hive stand right there, which probably wouldn't be too good in Southern California, because again, I don't see how that's going to be ant proof. You've got to figure out some way to make it ant proof. And so what we have is each little metal leg of this one we put into a cup, like a cat food can or tuna fish can, with some used motor oil in it, so that it creates a moat that the ants can't get across. Even water, ants will create a bridge over the fallen bodies of their dead comrades to create a bridge to get into that beehive, that source of honey. So this is the queen excluder right here, that metal thing. And this is used to keep the queen from going above a certain level. So you can put the queen excluder in at above the 2 brood boxes, and then above that will all be honey storage only. There won't be any. Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't want to use motor oil or vegetable oil or whatever, you can use what's called a surfactant. It's called soap, and it makes the bees sink.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to kill the bees. You mean the ants, right?
The ants.
Okay, all right.
It keeps them. I'm just saying it keeps them killing the bees, because I use a very small gap on mine. I actually use PVC.
Yeah.
And the ants go down in there, and using the soap makes them sink.
Yeah.
And I put a little bit of oil on top of it so it doesn't evaporate.
Yeah.
But if you gap it too far, then the bees can fall in there.
Yeah. So soapy water is a good way to kill bees too. If you say you got a really horrible hot hive, and you can just open it up, take warm soapy water and dump it down, it kind of messes up your frames and everything. So that's kind of a last resort, but it's something you can do if you really get stuck. Like the bees are killing your neighbor's dog, I mean, something like that, where all of a sudden you realize, these bees have got to go. So there's the hive stand with yogurt containers. Probably not as good as this. Is a little bit better. It's a kind of tin can, and That way it keeps the ants from getting up inside there. So here's a couple different frames, kind of frame analysis. Look at the top one here. This looks like drone frame to me. You see how it's kind of puffy, sticking out above the surface of the comb. So that's drone. Here's a queen right over here. There's Her Highness sitting there with workers attending to her. The far bottom side, that's hatching. That's a good looking hatching laying pattern. So it was laid in the middle, and it's been 21 days. Those have hatched out. Then it was laid a perimeter around that, and so that's still in the process of hatching out. And then beyond that is where they're putting in fresh eggs right now. So this is kind of the pattern inside of a hive, and so they'll relay that area where it's hatched out already, unless there's a problem. And I think it's pretty healthy looking. So unless those are drone cells there, in which case maybe the queen is missing. This situation up here, the queen is either on her way out or already gone, because in this case those are called emergency queen cells. That hive is trying to take existing eggs that were going to be workers and turn them into a queen, and it's going to try to do it to, in this case, 5, 6, at least 6 of them that I can see right now. And oh yeah, there's one behind that bee. Okay, so 7 of them. The first one out will kill the rest, and she'll go out and get mated and come back, and hopefully she'll survive. But as an emergency queen, she's not quite as viable as a regular queen would have been, and they will try to replace her at some point a lot sooner than they would a regular queen.
Well, so what constitutes emergency queen? It's too late in the brood process?
Yeah, it's already started to become a worker, and they didn't make a special queen cell for it. They're just trying to take an existing worker larva that's probably 3 days old and create a queen cell kind of out from the,
So if for some reason your queen tanks,
yeah,
then they would make an emergency queen?
Exactly, yeah.
She just doesn't get royal jelly for as long?
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. They haven't, the cell isn't quite as big, and there hasn't been giving the royal jelly from the beginning because they knew it was going to be a queen. They didn't know it was going to be a queen until it, just
right.
till the other queen got killed.
DNA makeup, she's just a little different.
Yeah, well, I mean, DNA is the same, right? DNA for all of them the same. It's just that royal jelly is the only difference between the queen and the workers, right? So it's just, I think it's probably the royal jelly. She didn't do quite as much.
Like size or oomph for her?
Well, I think, viability. She's just not going to be as fertile. She's not going to be as strong. She's not going to live as long.
Got it.
These are different extraction challenges you may run into. I've got one today. It's a second story, and it's inside the outside of the wall is T111, which is 4x8 sheets of paneling on the outside wall, and one of them, the paneling kind of warped away, and so the bees are underneath there. So I'm going to just pull the panel off, and there's probably going to be a huge array of comb in there. It's been there for 2 years, so it's probably a lot of bees. But this, if you've ever seen bees in a barbecue, this is pretty standard, this operation right here. I mean, there's a couple things, owl boxes, barbecues. I mean, if you've done bee extractions, you've run into these all the time. Owl boxes are fun because they're like the weight of a small refrigerator. They're 40 feet up in a tree. They have a tremendous amount of kinetic energy if they seem to break loose, and you get an explosion of very angry bees hitting the ground if you just don't happen to get it quite slung right. And the best thing is to throw a rope over a branch above it and tie it up really nicely, and then knock all the nails loose, and then just have somebody kind of gently lower it down to the ground, and then you can open it up and get in there and take the bees out. But it's a big challenge, and so don't go into it without a lot of preparation, and probably having someone else with a big smoker, just somebody to smoke full time to keep it going, because otherwise you got a problem. That one on the tire looks to me like it was probably in a stack of tires, and they threw the top tire off. It looks like to me that's upside down from probably the way it was originally sitting. There's a hollow tree there, and bees hanging in a tree. I've actually seen this. There's certain kinds of tropical trees in San Diego where bees will just hang on a branch and just right out there in the open. So, and I've actually also seen bees in a gopher hole underground, but those are definitely Africanized. No self-respecting normal European honeybee would live underground, I don't think.
Water meters. Yeah.
This is a cage. If you order a queen, this is how she's going to come. And she's usually in there with 4 or 5 attendants. They're helping to take care of her needs during the travel. And there's a plug at one end of this cage which is made of sugar. And so when you get it into the hive situation, when you want her to be about 3 days out from being released, you pull the cork on the sugar side, and then the bees on the outside start eating their way into that sugar plug, and 3 days later they release her into the hopefully friendly throngs of bees who are waiting to see her. Otherwise, we've got situations where if she's released too early into a feral Africanized hive, they will kill her. So, got to be careful. So we're going to talk about requeening bad hives today, and there's a lot of technique involved, and so we'll go through what the techniques are so you don't end up wasting your money on queens. This is a package of bees. It's 3 pounds of bees, typically about $120. And that comes with a queen also. She's in the side of a cage inside that package. And so we'll also talk about doing that today, how to install a package. So 2 ways to get a colony of bees. One is go out and catch a feral swarm and then requeen it at some point, hopefully sooner than later, because the longer it goes, the more chance you're going to have a problem with that hive. And the other thing is buy the bees and buy the queen. Just like a package like this, and put them in your hive, and you're good to go. You've got to wait. There's going to be a little bit of a lull in the number of bees in your hive. So about 7,000 bees in that box. But when they first get in the hive, it's going to be 21 days from when they build the comb and get the eggs laid before you're going to have your first new bees. So there's going to probably be a little population decrease before it starts to build up again. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both these situations. And we'll go through the different techniques involved. CCD, colony collapse disorder, something that's, I think, let's see, when they say 2006, it was first described. And like I said, I think that probably the biggest part of that problem is the pesticide called neonicotinoids. It's a class of pesticides based on the nicotine molecule. It's a very good pesticide. It does become a systemic part of the plant. It's put on seed coats, and the seeds are planted in the ground. Water runs through the ground, and some of the pesticide comes off the seed coat and gets into the water supply. And it's also a systemic pesticide, meaning as the plant grows, the pesticide becomes part of the plant. And so the bees, from drinking the water that runs off the field and from taking pollen out of these crop seeds that have had treatment with neonicotinoids, bring it back to their hive. They feed their brood, and it causes brain damage in the brood. So they have issues with navigation. So when your hive has got CCD, you don't end up with a pile of dead bees, like if someone sprayed them with some kind of pesticide. But what happens is you'll end up with an empty hive. All the bees are gone. They can't find their way back, and so you've got the queen and a couple of stray workers, and you're like, what the heck happened here? But anyway, you're in a lot of trouble. Yeah, go ahead.
Can that last several generations of bees as well?
Well, I mean, that hive that I'm describing is dead. So, I mean, you might be able to catch the queen in a queen cage and put her in some other hive, maybe. But the pesticide is in the food. It's in the nectar. I mean, it's in the honey. It's in the pollen. So, if you use that hive over with the same honey and pollen in it, you might just continue the process. Might not help anything at all. So, you probably want to start over again. And maybe try to find a new location, because wherever you are, they're spraying or using that pesticide. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a hive right before it collapsed. The bees were coming out in balls, and they were all fighting, and they kept falling out and flying back up in the hive, and another ball would fall out. It looked like they were just confused and fighting with each other.
Yeah, that's robbing behavior. What's that is, a hive gets weak. So you've got a nice bee, and you've got a nice hive. It's a little bit weak. It's getting near winter time. If you don't feed your domestic bees in this climate, they don't understand it's winter because it's not snowing. They just keep on making babies, and they end up starving to death because the nectar flow decreases dramatically in September, October, November, December. So what happens is that hive gets weak. So not only are these bees friendly to us, but they're also not very defensive with respect to the hive. Unless you got a very, very small defensible opening, another hive of bees next door goes, look at those bees. Look at all the sugar they've got. Let's get them. They go in there and they mug them. So my friend who lived in Encinitas said, I had these nice little friendly surfer bees, he called them. They came out of a surf shop. And then this other hive you put next to it just ravages it. Within I don't know, less than an hour, everything's gone. Everybody's dead. It's just like the Mongol horde coming through your town back in the good old days. So I think that the pesticide causes the weakening in the first place, and that the other things, malnutrition, mites, and viruses, I think are just opportunistic pathogens that occur because the hive is already weak. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Intensive agriculture. So when bees are used for pollination, they get stuck with a monoculture. They're eating nothing but almond all day long. And the same thing with you. If you had nothing but, peanut butter, what's the ramen noodles? If you're in college and you eat ramen noodles every day, you get pretty sick of it after a while. And so that's the same thing with bees. They have one crop, one food source. It's not good for their health, and that will cause them to suffer. So if you look at the shelf of pesticides at Home Depot, about 40% have neonicotinoids in it. It's called imidacloprid. It's got a couple other names, but it's basically the neonicotinoid class of chemical compounds. This is again the monocrop malnutrition. So we're going to talk a little about treating for mites today, how to detect you have mites, and then how to treat them. There's a lot of money being spent trying to save bees using different kinds of pesticides, but you're trying to kill this mite, but you're not trying to kill the bee. It's kind of hard with a pesticide. It's really a tough challenge. But that varroa mite is like if it was on your back, it'd be about the size of a turtle, hanging on your neck, sucking your blood. Obviously, it's going to cause a lot of deleterious effects to the bees in the hive. And there's that bee. So I'm going to go through a couple things today. The first thing is, we talked about catching a swarm. So if you catch a swarm is hanging in a tree. Let me see if I can go back to that. Let's see. So you'll see something like this a lot of times, a swarm just hanging in a tree. I went with my friend Susie, who works in La Jolla, and outside there's this nice tree outside her window or her office, and there's this big huge swarm hanging there. So we just walk up to it with our 5-gallon bucket, and we put the bucket underneath the swarm, snip the branch, and gently lower it into the bucket, put a little piece of mesh over, and put a bungee cord to hold the mesh in place, and took our 2.5 pounds of bees over to her house. And then we used a piece of sheet material, like pillowcase, as a little ramp out in front of the hive. And you just take the swarm and dump it on there. The bees will walk, they'll smell the comb, and they'll walk right into the hive. So that's one way to get them in. The other way is to just take the bucket and dump it in the hive. But a lot of times queens are jumpy, and they're like, I didn't choose this, how did they end up here? And they immediately swarm again. So that's very frustrating. You spend time and energy getting your new colony in there, and the next thing you know, it's gone. So the one way to prevent that is to take your queen excluder. They can manage this a little bit. And you can put the queen excluder between the hive box and the bottom board here. So if you put the queen excluder on right here, like that, if your queen's on the inside, all right, you got her walking in, you got her inside there, then anybody who comes out of this hive now has to go through that queen excluder. And there are Africanized queens that are Africanized bees are a little smaller than domestic European bees, so sometimes a queen can get through that anyway, but in most cases, she won't go through that screen. And so if she won't come out, you'll see like the bees start to swarm. So they've decided to go somewhere else. There's a big pile of bees in their front porch, and they sit there for a while, and she can't come out, and they'll go back in the hive. So it's like, yay. But about 48 hours, by then she's calmed down. They start laying eggs. They start saying, oh, this is not so bad after all. We cleaned the place up, we did the laundry, everything's looking good. We're okay, we'll stay here after all. So you can leave it on there for a while, then you can pull it off after 2 or 3 days. the next thing we're going to talk about is, so now you've got her in there. You've got this nice hive of very friendly little colony of bees, and then it starts to grow and grow. And now you've got 8 frames, which is 16,000 bees. And it turns out maybe they're not so nice after all. Maybe they're more like that wolf than they were like that little puppy you thought they were originally. And so it is very much the same situation. European bees are like the dog, if wild Africanized bees are the wolf. So the wolf is naturally adapted to its normal situation in the woods. It's great out there in the wild, just like the feral bees are here. The domestic version of it, the European bee, needs to be kind of cared for a little bit. We've kind of made the bee dependent on our care and taking good care of it. The same thing as your dog. If you put your poodle in the woods, it's going to get munched on probably. It's going to starve because no one's feeding it kennel ration anymore. But if you put a wolf in the woods, it's like, this is where I live. It's not a problem at all. Yeah. So the Africanized bees are defensive. They're very good at defending their hive, but that also makes them not so good at for pets sometimes. So all of a sudden your bees start getting very angry. You open your lid and you kind of smoke them a little bit. You open a little bit more, and all of a sudden you got a whole face full of bees. Like, uh-oh, this is going to be a problem, right? They go next door and they kill your neighbor's dog. Then okay, it's time to get rid of these bees, or time to make a big change here. So before it gets to that point, we can requeen.
Can I just ask you a quick question? Do you feel like the Africanized bees or the wolf bees are going to be stronger bees, though?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just because they're more well adapted, obviously, to living since they're still living.
They also swarm a lot more frequently, which is good for them. They keep getting their DNA out there, but then every time they do that, like half your honey, half your bees are gone. It's like, well, dang, I did all that work when half of it's just gone,
Because, and so, how long before how much space do they want before they want to swarm?
Well, if they fill up, 8 frames of this, it's probably about time for them to go. So they're gonna take off. Yeah, they're not like with European bees. They will swarm, but only when they're totally packed and they have no option, right? So I have something I call bee birth control, which is where in order to make them keep from swarming, I actually take an empty frame like this once in a while if they're getting full, and I put it in the middle of their brood area, so they feel like, oh, we still have room to expand here. We can pull the comb on that. We can stay here. We have plenty of room to grow, right? So if you can always keep like a little bit of room for them on the inside of the brood hive, in the brood area, then they feel like, well, maybe we're not so packed as we thought we were. And I'm just trying to channel what bees are thinking, which is, So
do you pull a honey frame and then put an empty one in the middle?
Yeah.
An empty one in the middle, scoot them all over.
Yeah, I would do that just once in a while to kind of keep that feeling that there's room inside there, and that, or
another box,
or just stack on. Yeah, keep stacking. Yep, keep stacking. It's a good way to go also. So if, say I've got a hive, it's feral, but it's pretty friendly, and I'd like to keep it. Maybe I can do that to keep it a little bit longer. But eventually, you're probably going to need to requeen. Just because they start swarming, it's like you're beating your head against the wall because you're doing all this work and they're just taking off with half your honey every 3 months. A normal feral hive will swarm probably 2 or 3 times a year. So that's what they do. And so now I've got this hive. It's full of bees. I mean, they're jamming in there. They're making all kinds of honey. They make great honey. They expand the comb. Everything's going really well. But I know it's time for me to get that new queen. So I go out and I buy my new queen. But before I buy the queen, about 3 days before I get her delivered, I really want to get that other queen out of there, because I want these bees to want a new queen. And if I just pull the old queen and put a new one in there, they'll kill her. Even if I give them 5 days, a lot of times, it's just they really have to have a time without the queen, because otherwise she's going to be in peril. So what I typically would do to this hive now is I try to get the old bees and young bees separated. Well, how do you separate old bees and young bees? Well, old bees are programmed to use this opening right here, and young bees are just new in the world. They're just coming out. So wherever they come out, they'll go back to that place, wherever it happens to be. So if I take this beehive full of bad bees and I pull it off the stand and I put a catch hive right here, I'm going to call this my catch hive, facing the same direction. Get rid of my queen excluder here. And then I take this second bottom board right here and put it on top of here facing this direction, and put my big bad bees full right here, what happens is, if I leave this alone for a day, all the old bees are going to be down here in this box full of new empty frames. All the new bees, young bees, and the queen are going to be in this upper box right here. So I've separated them, old bees and young bees. Young bees are much easier to requeen. And my example, which I've given a number of times, and I apologize if you have to hear it again, but if you had a poodle who was nursing little baby wolves, they would be overjoyed to have a mother to nurse from. They don't care if she's a poodle, if she's a wolf, she's a dachshund, whatever she is, it's fine, as long as she's a source of warmth and nutrition, right? But if you took a wolf and put it in front of a wolf pack and said, this is the new alpha wolf, they would eat her. And that's what happened. If you put a queen in this area with these old bees who know the old queen and don't want this little new European bossing them around, they will kill her. But this one right here, this is young bees. And they'll accept a new queen. So now we just got to get the queen out of here. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, there's 10 frames, and we can inspect frames. You pull them out, use a little smoke, look at each one. I mean, she's bigger. She looks different. The other bees treat her differently. They kind of move around her. You can sometimes notice that way. But if it's a really full hive, this is a hard thing to do. It can be hard. If she's Africanized, she's smaller, she's darker colored, you're pulling out one frame at a time, she's probably right ahead of you. She's probably moving right here. A lot of times I get the last frame is right here. She's on the wall or she's on the last frame, you know, because she's moving ahead of it. She can tell I'm coming. The queen's job isn't to fight. The queen's job is to survive. Whatever occurs, she's the future of that hive. If she's dead and she can't lay eggs, the hive's probably going to be finished. So her thing is to be as discreet and just hide as successfully as possible from your, foray into their hive. So she's probably going to be in this last one. If you find her, you can catch her. There's a thing like it's one of those barrettes you have in your hair. It's called a queen catcher. You can grab the queen that way. You can put her back into this box. You could put her back down here with these old bees. They'd probably love to have her back. And or you can just kill her. A lot of times they just snuff her because she's been the source of some mental anguish because the bees have been bad and they've been annoying me for some reason. They've been stinging me a lot. So you can find her that way, perhaps by searching. But if you can't find her that way, there's another method of doing it. It's called sifting the bees through the queen excluder. So I've been very successful with this. Probably 70-80% of the time we can find the queen this way. It helps to have a second person because just one more set of eyes, one more person to smoke. So we can pretend this is still the one I'm trying to look in. I'm going to take this is going to be, I'll move away the old bees somehow. I'll go get rid of the old bees. So if I've got an empty box here, we'll just pretend this is empty. And I put the queen excluder on like this. And I have my full box up here on top. I want to get all the bees to go through that queen excluder and go to the bottom. Well, how can I do that? Well, I take their comb out, one frame at a time. I brush all the bees off, and I scoot this over just wide, just far enough to get this frame in here. And one by one, I take these frames out of this top box, brush them off, and put them in the bottom box. So at the end, what I've got here is all my frames in the bottom box, which was empty before. Now it's full of all the frames that were in the top box. And all the bees are trying to get through that screen to get down to that old comb, because that's where they're going to be good parents and protect their babies. And I can smoke this, and what I end up with is a few hundred bees, all the drones, and the queen in this top box up here. And you just look around. You got to have good light. You keep looking around, and eventually you'll find her. She'll be sitting around there, kind of hiding out in the corner somewhere underneath a big pile of bees. But you'll find her. Very rarely does she get out of this situation here. So then catch her and put her back in the cage or squish her, whatever you're up to. And now
there's no frames in this one. They're all down there.
I've taken all the frames out. Okay. One at a time. I brushed them off and put them in the bottom. Okay. So then I take this away, and what I have now is I have my young bees, which have been sorted out. The queen's out of there, and so now I can requeen this.
So now
I get my queen in the mail. And see if I have my rubber band here anywhere.
I have a load of rubber bands.
I always say big rubber bands. They have a lot of uses in beekeeping. So if I want to put a new queen in here, what I'd do is I would take 2 rubber bands like this, and I would put them on a frame like this. Say this frame was full of brood. I want to put it on a brood frame because I want to get her smell on the brood and the brood smell on her, and I want everybody to all smell the same. So when she comes out, no one thinks anything different about it. And the way I would put it is I put it face down, the queen cage this way, and so that her smell is getting down on top of that brood. Up by the top, up here, kind of scrunch it into the wax a little bit. And I would probably leave it that way for a couple days before I pull the cork, before I pull that cork on the sugar side. There's going to be 3 more days. So it's going to be 5 days total from when I put her in here to when she's finally released. And she's released into a population of young bees. And I found that I have had very good success at getting new queens introduced in that kind of a situation. So it's a little bit more work. If you just had nice bees, you could just come along and pop the cork and put her in there and you'd be fine. You wouldn't have to worry about it because they're going to take her. If you've got feral bees, you're going to have to go through this procedure to save yourself wasting a lot of money on queens.
What are they running right now, about 35?
In quantity, you can get them for mid-20s. Yeah, we go shipping. You know, so I've got 15 coming on April 15th, and I've got 15 coming on May 7th. So if you need queens, yeah, let me know. Because they're coming from Hikem, which is up in Orland, California. So it's the same one that Alan Mikulich uses.
Okay.
And so that's why I've been using them. I've had pretty good luck. But you got to feed them in the winter. If you don't feed them, I think any...
Feeder boxes, I got feeder box tops now because I was using the ones you drop in like a frame.
Yeah.
And I was getting too much drown and they start rotting in the hive. The hives weren't tight. If
Yeah.
you've got any robbers in the area and they smell it, they're going to go after your hive. Like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you might notice if you spin out a frame in your honey spinner and extract all the honey out of it and put it back in the hive, the bees are really intent on covering that up and getting the smell out of there, because the smell of that honey is like a sign saying to all their predators, hey, bees live here, you know, come and rob us. So other hives can come and rob you, other predators can smell that, so they want to get that under control as quickly as possible. And you'll notice even with dead bees, they don't drop them right outside the hive. They take them and fly them away and drop them somewhere else. They don't want a big pile of dead bees there, because that also is a sign to every predator, hey, there's a beehive here. There's a big pile of dead bees. It must be a hive in this tree, you know. So you'll see that nature has got a lot of interconnections. There's a bird out there, there's some kind of a bird, you know, the honey badger. I mean, there's like the bird and the honey badger, right? So the bird tells the honey badger where it is. The honey badger goes and tears the hive apart, and the bird gets to pick it, you know, some of the leftovers, so they kind of work together. Yeah.
Is there any suggestion as far as after you've harvested all your honey and you put all those frames back in? I mean, is there a better way of doing that? I mean...
Well, I think it's probably fine. They do cover it up right away, but you'll notice that they do. They do want to get that.
I thought maybe you'd put in 5 at a time or something like that. I thought somebody had it better.
I mean, unless you had a lot of robbers around the neighborhood, you know, it's probably all right. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I do is I've got a deep super that I just set on a board so that mice and stuff can't get in on the bottom.
Yeah.
And then I just gap a board on the top, a cover on the top, and I put the frames down in there and let all the bees in the local area go in there and clean the comb off after I spun it, clean it right down to clean wax, and then I put them in a freezer in a bag until I'm ready to put them in the hive, so that I don't attract ants or anything like that. And it works out pretty good because they go to that, what I call a feeder station hive, rather than going into the hive and robbing the hive that I stuck the comb in. And I learned that the hard way too.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so another good thing about rubber bands like this is it's good for picking up comb. So on 2 weeks ago, we got a call from the county entomologist, Tracy Ellis, and she says, can anybody from your club go help us? We got all these kids being stung out here in Spring Valley, and we've warned the homeowner, we've told him we had a problem, and is there any way you can mitigate this, for us? So I said, sure, I'll go out and check it out. So I went out and I met the guy. First I called him, and they go, we don't know what his phone number is. So I looked his name up, and he was right on, I Googled him, and there was his phone number, so I called him up. And he goes, yeah, I had these bees. They were in an old wooden box for tools or something. And so my son dropped it off here, and so I thought I was going to try to get him to go into a beehive. So I put the beehive next to it, and they didn't go in there. And then the county said they were going to exterminate them. So I thought, well, I'll free the bees. So he opens the hive and dumps all the bees out. Well, of course, at that point, if you've got Africanized bees, you know what they do. They go berserk. They just start stinging anything within a 300-yard radius. And so it happened to be next door to a schoolyard. All the kids got attacked. So I go there, and there's the old toolbox broken apart. All the bees are still on top of it, trying to get back into it. They're like, this is our home. This is where our comb is. This is where our babies are. We're not going anywhere. This is where we live, right? There's a new box sitting there, but there's nothing to do to attract bees to this box. I mean, the smell of this foundation maybe a little bit, but there's very, very little for them to go here for versus their old comb. So I say, well, what we need to do is we need to take the comb out of that old toolbox, and we need to put it into frames. And so I have a little chunk of old comb here, but there is, you take the comb, you try to figure out which way is up. There's an up and a down to comb. You've got to put it in the right direction. So in this case, we take the comb, this was the top. We want to fit it into this frame, so maybe I could use the frame like a template and use my hive tool and put it on top of here like this. Try to get as many of the eggs as possible. So I'm going to just trim this to size using my hive tool, and then I'm going to put it over here. And there's a couple of good videos online showing us taking bees out of a couch that had been sitting on this guy's front porch, and the couch was completely full of bee comb. And so you get them in like that, and just try to stack it as tightly as you can and fill this frame full of comb. And what the bees will do is they will attach this comb to the wooden frame, and they'll start chewing through these rubber bands. And after a few days or weeks, you'll notice a big pile of rubber bands on the front porch outside on the ground. So they'll cut them off, they'll cut through the rubber bands, and they'll throw them out the front door. So that ends up working pretty well. And so we put all the comb into this box, and the bees walk right into the box. It's like, hey, you're like a bee whisperer. It's like, well, you gotta give them something they want, or else they're not going to go that direction. And the other thing you can do is give them something they don't want, which is there's a spray material, different material you can spray on their old hive to make them not interested in that. And there's stuff that smells like amaretto, and there's also stuff that smells like vomit. So if you're going to be in a house where you're trying to get them to move in a house, don't use the vomit stuff. It's like skunk smell. It lasts forever. So if you're near someone's home, you can use this stuff. It's called Bee Gone or Bee Quick or something like that. Bee Away. So again, a way to get bees from point A to point B. You can dump them, but if you get them to walk there, it just seems like it's a lot less hazardous to their health, and ends up being a little bit easier for you in the long run, as long as you've got time. If you're in a big rush, you've got to take matters into your own hands. But in this case, they all moved into the hive. And I said, you're going to want to put a queen excluder in the bottom of that hive, because we've just moved her in here, and she may be a little bit jumpy, and she may just take off. And he's like, well, I got this nailed down. I'm not going to do that. I said, all right. Next day I called him up, and he goes, yeah, they swarmed away. So we did all that work for nothing, but at least they're not stinging the kids anymore. So it was just one more lesson. The mind of a bee, yes.
I found that in the plastic excluders, the queen excluders that are plastic, I take 10 snips and I just cut them in the length of the opening, and I duct tape it in place. And the queen can't get out, and you can peel that off anytime, but the whole, that's what I do with the swarm right away.
That's a great idea. That's a very innovative approach. See?
Cheap.
Because you can make that one excluder.
Like a million of them, You just cut the strips as long. Sometimes I just I stuff it up with shade cloth halfway, and that way they have the air and such. And then, just use a little piece of it, whatever I have. But it works.
That's great. Good. All right, and so what else do you do? So say you come to a, say you've found a huge, like I'm going to find this afternoon in this guy's wall. There's going to be comb in there. Some of it's going to be like empty comb, like this stuff right here. Nothing in it. There's going to be honey. There's going to be brood. So how am I going to attack this big colony of bees in this guy's wall as efficiently as possible to get the bees out, not create a huge mess in the wall, and then get rid of anything which is useless. So I have three things. I have a waste basket. Anything that's empty like this, I just throw it away. And you could use it to make candles with later if you want to, or something like that. But just get that out of the way. I got 5-gallon buckets. I put the honey in those. I have food grade buckets, so I can just dump the honey into those. And then the brood is all going to end up inside rubber bands, inside a box hive right near the location of where this hive is. So then I close it up, and all the bees go inside there, and then around twilight I take the bees away. I got all the bees. I've got the honey. You can strain it through a cheesecloth or something like that. You can eat the comb if you want to. And I've basically gotten rid of the problem, which was this guy's wall full of all kinds of things he didn't want in there. We didn't use pesticides. We didn't create a toxic mess. We gave the guy some honey. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And you could price it. I would price it based on what an exterminator is going to charge him. So that's going to be probably $350 to start. So I mean, it's just one of these things where you can make a business out of this if you want to, and you can make money. You can also save the bees. It's kind of a win-win compared to, toxifying the universe and making it bad for bees too. So that hive, I get it home. I can sort old and young bees. I can put my new queen in there, and I got myself $125 worth of bees. I got a whole hive full of bees. I would have had to pay that much for 3 pounds of bees. So if you're going to start a hive, it's just one thing to consider. One more way of getting the bees going. What else do we need to know about?
Well, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So last night I got 3 swarms out of the bougainvillea. So I've got 3 separate queens. I've got 3. They're all in cardboard swarm boxes, and they're closed up. I put a feeder in each one of them, but I closed them up, and they're on the can inside, just waiting.
You gave her screen across the front.
Actually, I have it. I bought those dials, and I put them on the cardboard boxes, so I can dial it whichever I want. So now I want to eventually transfer them to all these people that are waiting, and I want to know the time frame because I'm leaving town in April. If I have the queen in there and I start out with 5 grains of wax in each hive, and they're all going. By the time I come back in May 7th, when you have more queens, is that too late to squish and change? What's the timing? I mean, can I wait that long?
Well, I mean, you're going to try to keep them in a nuke box that long?
No.
You're going to put them in regular?
Starting next week and the week after,
I'm
going to be
distributing
them and getting them in hive wooden boxes and condos. They're in their condos. They're
yeah.
Going to be going. So she hopefully will, I'll feed them and I'll hope, that until I leave, but then I'm leaving all of pretty much April.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the height of the nectar flow. So, I mean, I think there's not going to be a problem with them surviving it. I mean, obviously, they can be pretty big and pretty bad by the time you get back, but, it's not that long. It's a month, right? Month and a half? I think you'll be all right.
Okay. So I might need some of your queens in May 7th.
All right.
So obviously the sooner you requeen, the better?
Well, it's going to be a lot less problematic. I mean, a lot less chance you're going to have an incident,
So you would say between 1 and 3 weeks? 1 and 2 weeks? That's what I wanted to know. What's your timing as far as getting a swarm and requeening?
Yeah, I mean, so everything depends on the nectar flow because that's the only thing that determines how fast it's going to grow, right? I mean, I've talked to Alan Mikulich. He said they can fill, a 10-frame super, a 6-inch super in 10 days during the height of the nectar flow.
Okay. Yeah,
that's 40 pounds of honey.
I've seen the pharaoh bees.
I mean, every pulling this comb out of here, it takes about a pound's worth of honey, energy-wise, to pull this out. So if honey is flowing like that, everything's going to get pulled. Everything's going to get, all the cells are going to be laid. There's, I think somebody counted one time. There's 7,000 per side. I mean, if you've got, there's 14. I mean, there's something like 10,000 bees on this one frame, even with even with a little bit of honey around the outside. So if they lay 4 or 5 frames full, you've got a boatload of bees.
So initially I'm feeding them right now just to keep them there in a little swarm box. But then when I transfer them, I shouldn't necessarily feed them then because that'll slow the growth if
Right.
I don't feed them.
And say you're leaving in a couple of weeks, maybe you want to take the brood out and put it in some other hive and just leave them without so much brood. That way they won't have anything hatching over that next 21 days.
They're going to beekeepers.
Yeah.
So they're going to want to be keeping them there and
All right.
doing it. And it's just, I just told them I can't requeen until I get back.
Yeah, I think you'll be all right because it's 21 days, right?
Yeah, it's going to be 21 days.
So here's the life cycle of these 3 different subspecies. So queen, she gets out in 16 days, and I think that with the Africanized bees, it's about 15 days. So they get out sooner.
It's a day before.
And they kill the domestic queen larva. Worker, 21 days, just like a chicken egg, 21 days to hatch. So if you get a swarm and you put it in a hive, they got to get to work in a hurry and get eggs laid because it's 21 days before they got a chance to increase their population. So there's going to be a dearth of new babies for quite a while when you first get in there. Just a drone takes 24 days. Again, not so important. If you see a lot of drone eggs, usually that's a sign that either they're very profitable because drones are kind of like a luxury. You can have extra energy to build drones. It means you're doing pretty well, or else it means the queen's dead and there's no emergency queen coming, and the worker bees will actually start laying. There's something called a laying worker. They'll lay drone eggs as kind of a last chance to get their DNA out there. So, yeah.
So is there a time that it's best not to requeen?
Well, if you're in this area and it's like in the fall, don't bother till spring, I would say, because you're going to have to feed them all winter if you requeen them. And if you don't requeen them, they may last without being fed. And if they don't, it's no big deal because it's not a great queen anyway, right? So, yeah, I would say requeening in the spring is the time everybody does it. That's why right now, if you order queens, it'll be sometime in May before you're going to get delivery. All right, what else are we talking? Oh, mites. So say you've got your hive, and you want to see, do I have mites? Here's the stuff we can spray. This is the stuff this is called Bee Quick. This is the stuff that smells like almonds. So you got your hive, you got your screen bottom on here, and you want to find out if you've got mites. The screen bottom comes with a sticky board, and that board slides into this little slot right here at the bottom. So you slide your board in, then you take powdered sugar, 1 pound of it, regular 1 pound box of powdered sugar, confectionery sugar, and you dump it in your sifter, and you just sift it all around. And if you have 2 boxes, you use 2 pounds. You just every box gets a pound of this. And you take your brush and you brush it in there, like this. And all the bees look like Santa Claus. They're all looking like, covered with snow, right? And so they start to clean each other. And
It takes that much?
that's what they say.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just following the directions.
No, I didn't do that much.
So we had a woman who builds these screen bottom boards. We should probably have her come and talk at our club again because it was an interesting talk. She shows this bee, and she's got these mites on her back, and they're just hanging on. A female worker bee has a little bit of hair there. They're just grabbing onto that hair. And she had a nail file, and she's trying to pick this mite off with a nail file, and she couldn't do it. The mite was just hanging on there. But then she sprinkled sugar on, and the mite fell right off. Because his feet the feet of the mite are little sticky pads, and if they get covered with this dust, then it can't hang on anymore, right? So now you've got a bunch of sugar with a bunch of mites in it in a pile at the bottom of this box. So you can go through it, and you can look. There's a grid on the sticky board, 1 inch squares. So go into 1 inch square and try to count the number of mites in that square. From that you can calculate a rough number as how many are in your box. And there is a certain amount just out there. I think you're never going to find a box completely mite free because they come in and out on those wayward drones, I think, as they fly back and forth from hive to hive. So drones are kind of like the the homeless bees. They go from hive to hive looking for a free handout, looking for a little action. So they do take mites with them, I think, when they do that. So now you count your mite population. It'll tell you what you need to do next. If you've got more than 20 or 30 mites per square inch, then I think it's probably time to start a treatment. So the mites, some of the mites are going to be inside the cells, inside larvae, which hasn't hatched yet. So as those larvae come out, you want to get those mites sifted onto also. So you have to put sugar on every week or so for 4 weeks in order to get a full treatment, to make sure you get all the ones that are in larval stage out and also knocked off the hive. So those are some techniques, and I would look it up online to get the specific number as to how many you've got to count and how many weeks per treatment, because I'm not an expert at that. But that information exists, and so you can take the honey out. You don't have to worry about pesticides. If you treat with the different pesticide materials that are out there, you can't use the honey from that box. So you've got to be a little bit more careful with it. And plus, you can't call yourself organic anymore. Now you're just one more of the. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, does that powdered sugar, do you put those on the supers or on the bottom boxes?
I would. The place I think is where the brood is. So it's wherever the brood is. So that's the bottom boxes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, does that powdered sugar necessarily, it comes off the bees, but does that kill them?
The bees?
No,
the mite doesn't kill them. It just knocks them off. So if they fall through the screen, now they're on the ground. But now ants can get them, and now other things will come and get them. So they're out of the hive at least. If you have a non-screen bottom board, they're going to just crawl right back up in there again. So that's what you have to do, is knock them off and knock them out. Get them out of the hive. Yeah.
Wonder if anybody ever tried either neem powder or neem oil, which are both good edible microsides. And
neem, is that what is that?
Indian plant in origin. Neem oil is where you get neem, and which is used, and everything that crawls on the ground hates it. They don't like the smell of the oil.
All right.
Because it reminds them of the powder, which is so smooth to your fingers, and if you put it on your tongue, it's rough.
Huh.
And it's a microscopically rough plant powder. And
well, try it out. You could have a new $1 million idea here.
There's a lot of folks that don't like neem one bit. It's commonly used as a microside.
Yeah. The other.
You can spread it from neem powder on your.
Yeah.
On your furniture.
Neem. Neem.
N-E-E-M.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You never know what's going to work here. The other thing that people do use is essential oils. It smells like eucalyptus or lemon oil, whatever. It's a big, kind of a big cottony pad, and they just leave it on top of the frames. They put this is what's called an inner cover here. So this would go underneath the outer cover. So this is good if you're doing some kind of treatments with either you're feeding with pollen patties or you want to put some kind of essential oil in there. You put whatever you want there, and it gives you a little bit of a gap. So you put this on next, and then you put the regular cover on the outside of this. Gives you a little space.
Cotton balls just stuck in each corner.
Yeah.
Does it work then?
Yeah, seems to. I try everything.
It's just because the mites don't like it, so they.
Yeah, and it kind of keeps the moths away too.
Yeah.
I try to fight the moths a lot. But I use peppermint, spearmint, eucalyptus, cedar, and there's one other one. But any of those, there's a list in one of the books I read that I just wrote down all and ordered them all, and I just try each one of them in corners and see.
The peppermint also affects the nervous system of mice and rats, so it'll keep them away from the mice.
And it's organic.
Good stuff. Did you have anything else back there? You had another question, or?
I'm sorry. No, I'm good right now.
All right. So, depending where you are, the other thing that can get into your beehive is skunks. Skunks do, like an anteater, they will eat the bees. They'll just lick them as they come out the front door. It's kind of scratch at the front door and eat them. So, that's no reason to have a good hive stand, kind of get them off the ground. And then they can put maybe a little barbed wire around the base here, because that irritates the skunk's stomach when he's trying to lean up there and get a snack. So there's things you can do that way also. Sometimes you may want to put a strap around your hive to keep it from getting knocked over and getting, foraged by some other crazy critter out there. I usually, like I said, I usually put this whole thing on a carpet. So I take a piece of carpet, a piece of leftover scrap carpet, then I put a pallet on that, then I put the cups with the oil, then the hive stand, then the bottom board, then the hive. So complicated defensive technique here. But the carpet keeps grass from growing up, and you'd be amazed at how industrious these little ants are. One little branch touching your hive becomes a freeway of ants, and next thing you know, there goes your good queen. All your bees are like, we're out of here. We're getting eat out of house or home. So yeah, it doesn't take very long. You go check your bees every month. A month later, a lot of things can go bad. So this just makes one less problem. Go ahead.
I was told that somebody told me I had my hive stands that Mark made me. I brought him a bunch of scrap metal and he welded these, and they're about that high.
Yeah.
And because they said that as the skunk reaches up, the underbelly is exposed, and that way they can sting underneath their arms.
Oh, okay.
And their belly. So
good.
if it's too close to the ground, like I was using bricks and boards, etc. But if you have it high enough to where they have to reach then they're exposed.
Oh, okay. That's a good theory. Okay, that's great. Yeah, the reason that, let me just go through this hive design here, this hive stand design. The reason that I like this one and that it works pretty well. So this is built out of 2x4s and drywall screws. And again, just any kind of pipe. This was, I don't know, some kind of conduit maybe for electrical piping or something. But it doesn't take a whole lot of material. And these are drilled to kind of hold this leg. I put a screw in the side to hold this leg in position here. There's a screw right there. And the reason that these are recessed is because you'll end up catching a lot of your own bees. If you have the legs out here at the corners, then the cups will fill with water when it rains, and it will fill with dead bees because bees are going to be flying into it by accident. And so you'll end up washing away your oil after a short amount of time. So it's best if you can have, I've changed the design a little myself. I've made instead of the legs kind of splayed out at an angle like this, I make them vertical, and I put them a little closer to the center. So they're inside where they can't get rained on, they can't get dust on, and the bees have a hard time, drowning in them. So that's the hive design, the stand design that I've been using, and I've had pretty good luck with it. What else did we talk about today? Anything else?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I got my bees in the canyon.
Okay.
And so I had a stack of bee boxes on my deck.
Right.
So yesterday I find bees moved into the boxes on the deck.
Right.
Well, I want them in the canyon.
Right.
And I've heard that you can't move your bees that short of a distance because they'll keep going back to the spot.
Right.
So I took the bees this morning. I took them over to a friend's house about 3 miles away.
Yeah.
Now this morning I hear Bill was talking about the same problem, and he said he drove his truck around for an hour to confuse them, and then moved the hive fairly close to where they were before. Is that possible? Or
yeah, that would confuse me too. I mean, I'm confused. I'm confused by that. But yeah, I think that in order for you to move bees, less than a mile and more than 10 feet, you're going to have that problem. And what I would do is, what we were talking about earlier, separating old bees from young bees. Well, the young bees, whatever the new location is, they'll orient toward the new location. The only thing you're going to have is you're going to have a lot of old bees confused coming back to that original spot. So put a catch hive there. Just put a cardboard nuke there.
no, this was a swarm that moved into this.
Right, but it's on your porch, right?
Yeah.
So you move it to the canyon,
yeah.
But then put the catch hive on your porch just to catch the old bees. They're not going to do anything because there's no queen there.
I see.
But they're going to live in there, and they're going to think this is our new retirement home. We're a bunch of old bees living here on the porch until they die of old age, or until you take that box away somewhere else and just drop it off, give it to your friend or whatever. Okay. So all you're getting rid of is your old bees.
So the ones in the canyon, the new bees that are hatching, they'll just stay there.
Yeah. I just didn't think that they'd be producing anything that fast. So,
yeah.
well, I got to move, so I'll just. How long should I wait? But
a couple of weeks, I think. I mean, bees are amazing how well they remember things. I've heard that there's a hive memory. So you say you're a beekeeper, you haven't been back to the hive in 2 months. Well, the bees are completely switched in 2 months. But if they recognize you or whatever, maybe they like you or whatever. I mean, maybe there's a hive mentality. I mean, your body is composed of a lot of different cells, but you have a center of intelligence that kind of supersedes the whole individual structure, the cell structure. So I don't know. It's interesting to think maybe there's a memory in the hive itself.
So 2 weeks.
So sooner than later, if there's a memory, or no, 2 weeks is good.
I would say yeah, at least 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
She's not going to like that.
So when you say you put them in the
the
canyon,
bee away type
canyon or land
substance
canyon,
at
or
the
is it
death
city
location
canyon?
so that
It's actually the guy that lives up on
Well, possibly. I think what you're going to end up with is a lot of confused bees, which may end up stinging people. If you have a place for them to go, at least they're going to be calm and just go there, until they die of old age. The other thing I've heard is actually, if you change the opening, the bees think, oh, they've been moved a long distance because you changed the opening. So you stuff grass in the opening and make them chew through that. Then they think, oh, we're in a new place. And then they reorient to that spot, whatever it is. So I've heard of doing that. I'm not sure how well that works, but I've heard that's a theory also. Go ahead.
There's a couple of things that I've tried and Britt Poole told me about too. But you can lay when you move the hive to a new location, you lay a couple of branches on top to change the configuration of the hive. And you see the bees come out and they'll be going back and forth like this, scoping out the new picture. Another thing you can do, and this is, you can actually paint part of the hive to change the paint scheme of it. Or sometimes what I do is I just take some red duct tape and put it on the hive when I put it in a new location. And so they have to reorient to that new picture of the hive front. So they'll actually think they've moved to a new location. And they'll sit there and they'll sit there. The newbies will do it too. You'll see them flying out in front of the hive and getting that picture of the hive to come back to.
You reprogram.
All right, good tips.
I got a question about how bees find their new hive when they're swarming, when they're sending out scouts.
Yeah.
I've seen bees on tree trunks, individual bees going up and down it, and every dark spot or something that looks like a hole, they'll go up there and check it out. And they'll just keep hovering around it. I was thinking a good way to catch it would be to have a bee box with a black dots on it that would be attracted to them looking for dark holes.
Yeah, I mean, I just talked to my brother-in-law, and he used to live, he used to be a beekeeper back east, and he said he always kept an empty box in his apiary because he wanted to catch swarms as they came out. If you lose them, there goes your good queen, right? And so if you can catch them, you're doing well. So yeah, maybe keep an empty one around just to be a hive catcher, I mean, to be a swarm catcher. And maybe, put spots on it, make it look like a Dalmatian.
The Africanized bees swarm a lot more, so they're always looking for a new hive, and there's natural surroundings, there aren't that many appropriate spots for them to nest. Yeah,
oh yeah. I mean, I put an empty hive box in my driveway, and every year, kids, come on, look at this huge swarm in the driveway going inside there. It's like, whoa, I caught one again. So yeah, I mean, it's good. It's kind of fun, and it's a pretty good way to do it around here, I think. Yes?
Does every swarm have a queen bee or?
No, and I've actually had the same situation where the guy goes, these bees have been sitting on my porch for 3 weeks. Well, they're lost. They don't have a queen. They're all just sitting there waiting to die. And so you put a hive next to them, they'll all like, oh, finally, they'll walk into it, But those bees are probably shot because, again, they're already a couple of weeks old. They've been sitting there for a couple of weeks. I mean, they're at the end of their life. I mean, you might be able to merge them into some other hive, but then again, they've been sitting out there. Who knows what they've got? What kind of cooties they got to bring to your new hive. So maybe you want to be careful of merging them with bees that are good. Merge them with an Africanized hive, they'll probably clean them up all right. But yeah, I don't know if you want to merge them with a domestic hive, just because they're a lot less resistant to diseases that might come along. All right, what else would you have to talk about here? Say powering up and powering down. So this is what I always think of, I don't think of bees as good and bad so much. I think of bees as strong and weak. So now say I've got my new hive, and I've just put I separated my young bees, my old bees. I requeened my young bees, and I put my queen in there, and she starts laying eggs. So we've got another 3 weeks before her offspring start coming out, and then all of a sudden you'll notice like there's these dark bees, and then all of a sudden there's a golden bee once in a while, and then there's a little bit later there's a couple more, and after a while it's like her daughters start running the hive. There's a lot more of them coming in and out. You'll notice a couple different shades of bees happening, and so a lot of the energy is used, pulling comb. So I can take my frames of foundation like this and put them into my bad hive and just let them pull comb, put them to work doing something that I want them to do, and that way, they're not laying eggs, they're not making brood, they're not making more wild bees, but they are helping me. They're helping me by pulling this comb out, so I can put that into my weak hive, and it's kind of giving them a head up already. It's giving them a boost. And I've also taken brood from a bad hive and putting it into a good hive. It's kind of like adding guard bees, adding a little motorcycle gang to your nice hive to make it a little bit more defendable. And so, yeah, I do that. And I'm not sure how well it works. If I'm transferring diseases back and forth, maybe I'm causing myself more problems. But it did seem to help one summer when I did it. And by putting Africanized bees in a domestic hive, they don't get as riled up, because partly what gets bees going is the pheromone of the queen, right? And so if she's like sending out all kinds of attack pheromone, then that's going to get bees riled up and going. But now you got a domestic queen there. She's not doing that. She's not sending out that it's kind of a banana smell, right? You'll get it sometimes. You're in a big hive full of nasty bees. It's like, wow, there's this kind of odor. And so she's not doing that. So maybe these bees are a lot calmer if you've got them in that situation. And, if they're good workers and they're good guards, give them a chance to do something good for you. So that's kind of my idea of powering down and powering up hives. And I'm yet to see whether it works, in the long picture or not. I didn't feed my queens this year, so all the ones that I requeened last year died. So I was, except for one in Mount Helix. Some places there, they just last all winter. So I've got a lesson to myself. I'm going to feed them this year, no matter what. Every couple of weeks, I got to drop some pollen in there. Go ahead.
Just, I was removing a hive from a property about 3 weeks ago, and the bottom brood box was empty. We had 2 hives sitting there. There were bees going into the bottom over here, but they were going into the medium supers up here, and so we had to go through that hive frame by frame by frame, looking for the queen, because evidently the queen had died in the bottom and the new queen had gotten into the top.
Huh.
And she wasn't in the back corner. As we were pulling the last frame out, she was running across the top of the box by herself, going this way, and she had a big clump of bees over here. I don't know if she was throwing a distraction or whatever. So when you're pulling frames looking for the queen, sometimes she's not in a ball of bees, but she's skedaddling all by herself. But she's very distinctive. Once you see a queen, you'll never miss one again.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was all by herself and just. She was pretty quick.
Yeah. They're good at surviving. That's their one job. Live and start laying eggs. Because they can lay a couple thousand a day when they get real busy. Right? They got the right opportunity, the right environment. That's their job.
Tell us a little bit about feeding.
So the 2 different ways they feed bees: they feed them pollen patties and they feed them sugar syrup. And I've had outside feeders before, but I've heard and I've experienced that does attract robber bees. So the inside feeder frame is what I've been trying out. So you take it's plastic, it's black plastic. It's about the shape of a frame, and it's hollow. So it's kind of a long, narrow slot, and you put screen down in there. The bees can crawl in and crawl out without getting drowned in their own sugar. The syrup recipe is 2 cups of granulated sugar and 1 cup of water, so it's a pretty thick syrup. You may have to warm it a little bit.
What sugar?
Yeah.
What kind of sugar?
White, just table sugar, granular.
Isn't a better sugar?
I mean, some people think. I've heard, feeding bees back their own honey. There's problems with that. It increases robbing behavior, and so this supposedly is the best way to go. I mean, it's what the commercial guys do. Whether they know what they're doing, they're making a living at they must know something. So the other thing is pollen patties, and I got a recipe online which I fed to my bees. They weren't real crazy about it, but it had soy flour, nutritional yeast, and honey mixed together into a paste, and then made into little frozen patties, like hamburger patties, and then you can separate those with wax paper, and then one by one put them into these on top of the frame, on top of the inside the inner cover.
Inside cover?
Yeah. And they'll eat those, in a week or so, and then just put a new one in there. So that actually keeps the brood population happening during that winter dearth. You keep your brood numbers up so that when spring comes, you got a better hive ready to go.
Soy powder,
Soy flour, like a cup of soy flour. I'm not sure how much nutritional yeast it was. Maybe like a quarter cup of that. Look online, you'll see a recipe there. And that was the 3 ingredients in honey. So the honey makes them want to eat it, and then there's a little bit of protein in the other ingredients. And you can actually put pollen in there also, but pollen's pretty expensive, so I mean, unless you're really serious about it.
Pollen kind of loses its potency too very quickly, even if it's refrigerated.
Yeah.
It doesn't last long, like 6-8 months.
Yeah.
And most of the nutritional value is gone.
Yeah.
Do you think there might be a problem with GMO soil? If you're going to make food?
Yeah, I mean, I don't trust a lot of GMO products, so yeah, I don't know how you're going to separate non from GMOs.
Buy non-GMO.
Can you?
I was actually one time buying organic sugar to make my syrup. Sugar. I mean, you know, it's more expensive.
What's 2 to 1?
I did it.
Is that what you said?
I did it 2 to 2.
2 to 2.
But I know also read in a book where you, if you do it, like even increase it more, like 4 to sugar to water, then wintertime, it's, you know, you're, I don't know. I've never done that, but my girlfriend did it this winter with her little hive, and she said, well, it just went ballistic. I mean, it grew so fast. So I don't know. I don't know if it's good for them, but
This is 1-to-1 ratio?
I've done it 1 to 1, but she did it like 2 to 1, 2 sugar to 1.
Yeah.
So it was super sugar water.
Yeah.
And she said, well, she's reading everything, so she's like enough to make her, you know, crazy. Yeah. She's calling me every second going, and then I just read it, and I'm going, okay, give it a try. But her bees are doing great. So,
Yeah.
but she did it over the winter.
If you don't use a feeder frame, is there another way to feed them sugar solution?
I mean, in emergency, I've just dumped sugar on there, but you know, you might be afraid you're going to attract ants and things like that. I mean, it's good to keep it contained.
You've
And
seen those little ones that go in the front door?
That's
Yeah.
what I do.
that's
Yeah.
I just like it because during the wintertime I put 2 of them in there, and it takes half the entrance right away, and it's really sealed. And then as I feed them, I don't have to disturb them and get them cold or anything. I don't have to lift the lid up or anything. I just take the jar off and give them more and put the jar back on. And if it's hot, all of a sudden we get a 90-degree winter day, I can take both jars off, and then they can go in and out of the opening. And I've never disturbed their opening. So I prefer that, just during the winter time as far as that.
Did you have some other feeding method?
Yeah, I have a robber hive in my neighborhood, and I know where it's at, but it's not on my property. So I have learned kind of by trial and error. Sometimes baptisms of fire. I've had some huge battles in my backyard when they find a weak hive. And somebody at the last meeting told me something, and I tried it. And what I did was I took one of those Tupperware tops, you know, with the ridges on it. And he said, take a plastic bag, put your sugar water in it, lay it down, but I put the plastic, you know, under it so it wouldn't leak onto the wood or down into the hive. He said, poke little holes in the top side of it, and the bees can come on top of there and get the sugar water out of it slowly, but it's super exposed, so it doesn't throw a lot of sugar smell into the air. And if you put it in the top of the hive, any robber bees have to come all the way through the hive to get to it. And I tried it, and it literally worked. I was amazed. I was in there for a couple of days. So what I did the second time was I did it again, except I put a piece of wire on it and slid it through the front of the hive into the bottom, on the bottom board, and so I could pull it in and out through the bottom of the hive without having to open it. So I could take the bag and set it on this thing on the edge of the hive and just slide it in there slowly.
A Rubbermaid top, right?
Yeah, it has to be low enough so you can get it in the front slot of the hive.
And a Ziploc bag.
And a little Ziploc bag, and I just put the sugar water in there and poked some holes in the top of it and slid it in there, and about 2-3 days later it was empty. The bees had consumed it, and because I had talked to him about the fact that, you know, I had problems with, you know, the internal feeders and the hive front feeders. And he came out of nowhere. He said his wife didn't like him doing it though because he was poking holes in plastic bags and not recycling them.
You can use the same bag though, just fill it back up. Right?
Yeah, just put a mark on the top that says us.
And back to bee capture one more time. I've had one more situation where bees are in a wall. In this case, it's a concrete block wall, so I'm not going to take the wall apart to pull these bees out. But they're in there, and they're using one access hole, a discrete, in-out hole they're using. So it's not like the wall of a building made of shake where they've got a million holes to access it. It's just one discrete hole in the side of a block wall. So what I did was I took a bee escape, which is a one-way bee door, and put it across that door. So the one-way bee door is a plastic device. It's got two pieces of copper wire, and the bees can go out, but they can't come back into it. So what you do is you can put that over the door, and then the bees will go out, and they'll pile up, and they'll try to get back in, and they'll be piling up there. And you put a catch hive there, and eventually they'll resign themselves and go in the catch hive because they smell the wax, and it's a chance for a little bit of protection. And after 3 or 4 days, if you're good at sealing it, the queen actually will come out. And she'll like, no one's feeding me, no one's coming home anymore, where's the groceries? And she comes right out the front door. And so 2 things can happen at that point. She can either move into that catch hive, or she can just take off with everybody and take off as a swarm. And I've had both situations happen. So the other thing was, if you're against an irregular surface, you need something kind of flat to put this queen excluder against. And so what I've used is modeling clay to kind of make a flat place in a corner or where it's not an easy surface to get through, and use modeling clay to kind of fill in all around it, and then just leave this one hole in the middle where you can put the queen excluder across, and then use duct tape or whatever to hold it in place. So just a couple tips of making something work another way besides killing them. And there are ways to kill them too. If you're stuck, there's another chance, but we'll just try to use as much of this rescue techniques as we can up front before we bother to kill them. All right, what else? Anybody else got a question? Any other topics?
So that's the reason that you don't really check your hive more than once a month, or take the lid off, because you're trying to let them maintain their temperature in there.
Yeah, the temperature is important. On a cold day, you don't want to open it. You don't want to open it in the rain. So yeah, in the wintertime, you probably don't want to get in there. Even when you're in there, I've heard people say you should be in and out in a minute. Get in there and get what you need to do in a minute and get out of there. Don't spend all I love my bees. I'm playing around here. It's not like gardening. You really don't want to leave it open for a really long time because you're sacrificing the health of the brood. And also you're attracting robbing bees. Other bees are figuring out where your hive is. So it adds a lot of tension to the bees' lives to have them exposed for a long period of time.
There's a lot of people though that micromanage their bees to the point where they look at every
they
frame all
just
the
leave.
time, and
As long as it's not killing them.
yeah,
Right?
maybe it makes it harder. But I don't do that.
Yeah. There's things you want to look for. You want to look for queen cells. If you see queen cells, okay, my queen's dead, or she's trying to swarm, or something's happening here. So you're looking for these like little peanut-shaped things. I think we saw them earlier in that slide. My light went up. Yeah, so it kind of like the shape of your. Yeah, right here. This is it right here. So if you see that, you got an issue. If you don't see any brood, any larva with open brood, then you may have a problem. If you see like cobwebs in the corners or on cells, that's wax moth. You got a problem. There's a lot of these problems you can deal with. Wax moth usually is just an opportunistic predator that comes in because the hive's weak. If the bees are strong enough and covering all those frames, there's no place for a wax moth to get a foothold. So you can squish them. I like to feed mine to my chickens. They think they're delicious. So wax moth is an issue here. Mites, so you want to try maybe do this diagnostic technique once in a while to see what kind of a mite load you've got. What else? Nosema, which I haven't really seen around here, but a lot of parts of the country. I think it's from too much humidity. Because it's so dry here, I don't think we get much of it. But humidity inside the hive creates this kind of a nosema, which is a virus, I guess, that it affects the larva, and it supposedly makes them stink real bad. So
It's kind of like dysentery. They have diarrhea, and you'll see it in front of your hive coming and going, and they kind of splat it.
So
I had one time where it was like that.
yeah, kind of a yellowish.
Mildewy inside the hive, wasn't getting good ventilation. And what happens a lot of times also, if it's too cooped up, I think they just poop in there, and it gets gross. And then they get this.
And sometimes we've also we've drilled holes, like a 1-inch hole here, and put screen across the inside of it so it doesn't become an entrance, but just to create more ventilation. So I don't know if that's something you want to experiment with, but I've done that in the past, and it seems like it helps them keep it cool. But as long as the beehive is painted white, I think even people in the desert use this hive design, so it should be, as long as they have enough water, they can keep it cool. So that's what they do. They get resin to make their own bee spackle to kind of keep the hive sealed up. So they make propolis out of this resin. They use water to keep the hive cool, and they use nectar and pollen as their food sources. This frame here has pictures on it, so let's see what this is. This is a picture of a queen, so just some more devices. If you want to come take a look at these after the class and look at different things, this shows what larva looks like. You come take a look at these. You can see white larva. So if you see white larva in the cell, that means the queen's been there at least within the last 3 days. So you're probably safe. And there's a queen cup. So again, this is a queen cell starting. Again, you know that you're probably having a problem. They're going to swarm because it's too crowded and they want to swarm, or because the queen's dead, they're trying to make a new queen.
So at the point where you see a queen cell, you're just toast, or can you give them a little room and?
I think you're going to need to get rid of the queen cells, move them to another hive that's queenless, maybe, or separate the hives and put those. Maybe take your queen out of here and put her somewhere else and just let them make their own queen, because they're already kind of in the process of doing it. It's hard to discourage them. Once they've kind of got in their head that's what they're going to do, it's hard to talk them out of it, I think.
Would you re-queen at that point?
I'm not sure if that would help. I mean, what I would probably maybe take the queen away and put her somewhere else for a while, and then if they try to make their own queen, she's going to probably breed with a lot of Africanized drones, and so she's going to be kind of half hot when she gets back. Maybe then take her out and put the queen back in. I'm not sure what would be the best way to go, but yeah, once they start that process, you need some pretty major intervention to keep it from happening.
Well, because you don't really know if they're just requeening themselves or they're getting ready to swarm, right?
Right. Yeah. So here's what capped brood looks like. It's kind of brown. It's flat. It's flush with the surface of the cells. This is mixed brood. So I guess this is drone comb here, and this is regular worker comb over here. Varroa. This shows the mites on the backs of the bees. Come take a look at these if you want to see what it looks like. I need my magnifying glasses to see it. Here's beetle larva right here. This looks a lot like the wax moth larva also. Little white grubs. And like I said, the chickens find them delicious. Hive beetle. I have never seen that. Hive beetle, have you ever seen that?
It's mostly south.
East coast or south coast? South, yeah. Brood hatching, so this is just baby bees right here, baby bees being born. This is the prenatal unit. Wax moth. Oh, this is if your hive looks like this, call the chickens in. You can scrape it off, and you can put it in the freezer for like 4 to 8 hours and kill them off, and put them back into a strong hive, and they'll clean them up. But yeah, that's a hive that's been abandoned and been overrun by wax moth. Chalk brood, I haven't seen that around here, but that's what it looks like. I think it's a disease, and I think those are dead. It's dead in the cell. Yeah, dead brood. And brood can die just because it's not being kept warm enough. It can die from not having enough coverage of other bees. So the population of your beehive drops for some reason. Your brood can't be covered. It'll die for that reason. Here's advanced AFB. I'm not sure what AFB is. Foul brood. So that's that funny looking color where it's kind of nasty, sticky, stringy material inside the cell. So if you see something kind of stringy, kind of like mucusy, then that's what that is, advanced foul brood.
If you take a stick and stick it in the brood back, and it's ropey, comes off.
Yeah.
Like a spider web, that's what you got.
So here's a picture of that right here. They're putting a match stick or something in there and kind of showing how that's sticky and gross. Anyway, so that's pretty much the presentation. I think we covered all our topics. Anybody got any more questions we want to talk about? See if we can check our list here. Pardon me? We can clap now. We can do whatever we want to do.